All right. Well, thank you so much for all those of you who joined us early, and we still have some who are coming. I want to thank you so much for your patience. I know that we have attendees that are still on their way. And before we get started, I just want to say my name is Hadia Fain, and I'm going to be your host for this particular panelist. You might hear from some other people on my team later in this week, but this is Life Services Alternatives 2025 IDD Community Panel Series. In this particular series, we're going to be talking about empowering siblings as advocates and also how they're involved in housing planning for individuals with IDD. We have a great group of panelists that we're going to be talking with tonight, and I'm excited to invite them. But before I do that, you are welcome, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks.
This session's really about lifting up sibling voices, exploring how siblings of individuals with intellectual or developmental disabilities can play active roles in care and advocacy and housing planning. And so we're, again, honored to have an incredible panel of speakers joining us today, each who brings unique and personal family perspectives to this important topic. Before we dive in, there's just a few housekeeping notes that I want to make mention. This webinar today, it will run for exactly 1 hour, and it is being recorded. If you're an attendee, meaning you're not on our panel, we can't hear or see you, but we will be able to take questions and answers at the end of this presentation. And we're going to do it a little different this year. We're going to have our panelists speak for a matter of time. We've given them an allotted amount of minutes. And then afterwards, we're going to come back up with questions and answers from you. So if you have questions that you want to ask and you're in our audience, feel free to put them in the chat directly to our host, our panelists, myself, and our panelists. Feel free to ask them in the Q&A, or feel free to ask them anonymously in the Q&A if you just want to know and you don't necessarily want to be acknowledged directly. We will have some follow-up after this if you want to talk with or extend the conversation with any of our panelists and ourselves afterwards. But before that, we want to ask you a couple of questions. So first, we want to get a better sense of who's in the room and who's joining us. So if you're in this poll right now, and if you're in this room right now, would you please take a moment to just help us by answering a few poll questions? We just want to know, how'd you hear about us? So just give a second. We're gonna pop the poll up for you to answer. There's about 3 questions. How'd you hear about us? What's your relationship to someone with IDD? And then also, what's your biggest concern? What's your biggest concern when it comes to future housing and care planning for your loved one with IDD? And so far, we have a few people who are still answering, so I'm going to give it a few more seconds. But thank you so much for taking the time to read these questions and fill them out for us. All right, I'm going to give it just a few more seconds here. All right. Thank you so much for taking the time to answer these questions. I'll give it just a couple more seconds to let you guys finish. And then I think we're going to go ahead and move forward. Perfect. All right. So I am really excited today to introduce our panelists. We have Merrick Wolf, who is a sibling and an advocate, Christine Wang, who's also a sibling of Dee Dee, a resident in LSA home. And then we have Lisa Zugel, a parent whose daughter is deeply involved in her siblings' long-term care planning. She's here representing her daughter, who's deeply involved in her siblings' long-term care planning. And so we're excited to have her. At the very end of this, as it was last year, we've partnered with SV at Home, and we're going to have a special guest joining us. Her name is Reva. And she's going to take a couple minutes at this session and also to share with us some important resources for if you're looking for housing for yourself or your loved one and you want to learn more. All right. So with that being said, thank you so much for joining us. Let's begin by hearing from Merrick Wolf, who will share his experience of as a sibling of someone with IDD and his personal joint journey into advocacy and support. Merrick, the floor is yours.
That's a terrible picture. Hello, thank you. Thank you for letting me be a part of this. Two quick, my own housekeeping things. First of all, I'm sorry I didn't have the consistent background here that wasn't working with video. So this is my own place. Also, I'm going to have to actually leave right after I finish the talk here. So thank you. I guess I'll just start saying that my sister's Hillary, and she is 54 years old, and we're from New York, and we all moved out here to California, and Hillary and my folks lived in San Diego, and we're finding that there wasn't enough services there, and they found Hatikva. Initially, it was called Hatikva House in Campbell, and she was there. It's been over 20 years. And a few years ago, the person who was in charge retired, and we were so fortunate LSA stepped in to manage it. And it's been absolutely wonderful, wonderful partnership. My sister has Williams syndrome. You may have to look that up. And she has been actually doing pretty well all these years. She's had the same job at Safeway now for pretty much the whole time she's been there, and is really flourishing. And well, my mom and dad took care of her, especially my mom unfortunately got dementia. My dad was taking care of her for the most part. He passed away in November. So my brother and I have had to step up. Even we've all been very close anyway. But my dad was, failing health, so we've stepped in more, and we take her to as much as we can to concerts and shows and out to dinner and all kinds of things. So she has another life outside of Hatikva home. And we're really just happy with how things are going. Do you want to ask me any particular questions I can address?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I'm sorry that you have to leave immediately. But Merrick, I'm glad that you were able to join us. I think there's something to be said about and it sounds like your brother actually has something he wants to say, but before he does, um, it sounds like you've had quite a bit of transition just recently in your family. Can you talk to us just a tiny bit before I let your brother Bruce, who's also pictured here, before I let him ask a question, can you talk to him just a little bit about Hillary's, no, without going into, I guess, too many personal details, but just the planning for Hillary before your late father passed and your mother was unable to care for, you know, obviously herself or even your sister. What went into that? What was the thinking between you and your brother? I know personally, if it been my family, we probably would have been fighting, been fighting and pulling each other's hair out.
Mm,
And
mm.
so you're very
Oh
fortunate
no.
type of dynamic.
Oh no, no. My brother and I have a great relationship, and we kind of just easily fit into our own roles. My brother handles a lot more of the family finances and legal business and all that kind of thing, and he's also on the board, which is so wonderful, of LSA. And then I'm more of the day to day, so taking her to doctor's appointments and things like that. But we share, and keeping her socially active when we can, to, as I said, out to eat and to shows and things like that. But we did have to sit with our dad. We did this a few years ago already, to plan to go over all the paperwork and everything that's needed, for after, when he's gone. And that's gone pretty smoothly now. So yeah. I don't know
Sounds
if
like
Bruce wants to add anything into that.
yes, I was gonna say sounds like there's a lot of paperwork. Are you okay with us allowing, I know we didn't plan this, we didn't rehearse this, but are you okay with allowing Bruce to just come on? Is that all right?
I insist. I didn't know he was
Okay,
leaving.
all
Yeah,
right.
absolutely. Of course.
Well, then I've promoted him to panelist, and
Please.
Bruce, you have the floor whenever you're ready. I think yep, there we go. That's it. And then whenever you're ready, our team's actually going to spotlight you, Bruce, and you can just unmute and talk. You don't have to type in your questions.
Okay, great. I don't necessarily have any questions
Or
per
comments,
se, but
I should say. Sorry,
yeah,
comments.
just to add what Mark was saying, you know, the kind of the planning we did. I mean, as he said, we took the time to sit down with our father um, a lot, you know, and tried to much information as possible before his memory decline started kicking in, which we kind of had noticed. I mean, there's still a lot of things I'm trying to uncover, but you know, as far as Hillary is concerned, um, you know, the transition into Hatikva House before LSA was very important. One was, you know, our family, you know, was everybody lives pretty independently, and our folks had kind of the principles of, you know, everybody should have their own independent freedom, and felt Hillary should be able to do that too. Has a lot of functionality and has the ability to do that, and obviously she really does. And um, before and now with LSA, she's thriving and still growing. Um, just, you know, being healthy and all that. So the transition wasn't that hard when it comes to Hillary. You know, and as Merrick was saying, you know, we each of us have goals quite actually very natural. And Merrick, I should say, you know, really covers a lot of the health and medical side of things. I mean, there's just so much to track, you know. So it's you know, us being able, we're very fortunate that we're able to do this together and that we get along so well.
That's really awesome. I know you have to step off, Merrick, but Bruce, as unorthodox as this is, and I know we didn't practice this in our rehearsal, but Merrick, would it be okay if Bruce answered a couple of questions from the audience if they had it for you? So
Of course.
we keep you
I
on,
trust
Bruce,
him
as
implicitly.
okay. We keep
Yes.
you on, Bruce, as a panelist question asker. And I just want to thank both of you. Merrick, thank you for your time. Thank you for your willingness
Sure.
to be here. I'm sure this question is going to come up later, but we're going to move on to our next panelist. But I'm sure there's someone in the audience that would love to have been a fly on the wall with that conversation, that last conversation you had with your father, with your late father, who's done so very much for LSA and has been a pillar in the community from what I've heard. Just to ask, you know, okay, what do I need to know? If there was a way to bullet point that, I'm sure that would be worth 1,000 New York Times bestsellers. And so stick around for that if you're listening. I am going to ask that question at the end of this panel, but I want to make sure that I have enough time for all of our panelists. Thank you so much, Bruce and Merrick.
Thank you.
And Merrick,
Thank
if
you
we
so
don't
much.
see you, good afternoon, good evening, good night.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much for sticking around, Bruce.
Of course.
All right.
Sure.
Our next
No
panelist,
problem.
is Christine Wang, who will reflect her role as a sibling and advocate for her brother Didi, a resident in the LSA home. Christine, please go ahead.
Hi, thank you, Hadia. Should I just go ahead and start? Let's go ahead and start.
Absolutely, we can
So
hear you.
this is okay. So this is my younger brother. He's about 4 years younger. I'm 4 years older than him, and when he was born, you know, my parents immigrated from Texas, from not Texas, from Taiwan to Texas in the 60s, in the mid 60s. And so it was, we're the first family. There weren't that many, you know, Asian families in the area. And when my brother was born, I also had not, I didn't even know what it was. I just knew that he was a little slow. And whenever I would ask my parents, okay, what's happening with, what's happening with Didi? And Didi is actually his nickname. It means little brother in Mandarin. So so we call him Didi. And it was interesting because I didn't actually really know what it was. Whenever I asked my parents what was, how to help him, what was happening, why is he different? My dad would just tell me, oh, he's just a little slow. He just needs, some help and some support from you. But no one really talked about what it was that he had. And I actually didn't know he actually had Down syndrome until much later in my life, and was able to talked to my parents about it and had a little bit more understanding around it. Because I had gone and searched and gone out to the library, and you would think within a family we would be able to talk about it, but I don't know if it was maybe cultural. It might have been cultural, where it was the one thing in the room where no one really had words for or really could talk about. And I mean, it could also be that there was the cultural barrier. There might have been a language barrier, but not really, because my parents are pretty fluent in English. So I just feel like that there was, there was a lot of mystery around it. And then as I got older, I had more understanding around it, and I think was much more able to kind of help myself in terms of understanding the role that I played. Because I think in our family, it was just me and my brother as the two kids. And so usually it was both my parents and myself who were usually helping or assisting him at home. And so I think, it was an interesting experience. I felt like I think because I did not have really extended family around, it was also not something I could talk about outside the family. And I do think that there was some cultural stigma there as well about it. And I think growing up as a teenager, I think it was very isolating, because I didn't really know anyone who had a sibling or even knew anyone who had any sort of disability. And so it was, it was an interesting process for me growing up. I think it was the isolation, I think, that made it probably the journey a little bit more challenging. And even growing up, I think, my parents didn't really have words for it. I ended up, it impacted me because I ended up being a special ed teacher as a result, and went into special ed and learned a lot about developmental disabilities. And so I do think it definitely directly impacted me in that way. And I think after college, I think I was much more equipped to be able to support him and to support my family and to support my parents, and understanding how to help him, because I think that was something that was a question for me throughout my childhood.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Christine. I know we're at time, and I appreciate you just being so not just transparent, but also open now to talk about your experience. And again, we're out of time to ask questions now, but I just want you thinking about this, because I am going to ask at the end of this panel. Bruce and Merrick are very like, they're like, that's just our roles, we just get it done. Didi was your sibling, your other person, right? And that dynamic was different. It would be nice to hear from you, being kind of I don't want to say soul sibling, but you are, right? That is able to, in a neurotypical way, kind of fend for your family. How do you think that differentiates from like having someone to confer with about what to do when dad goes, or what to do when mom is no longer able, in terms of housing? So just please stick a pin in that. We will come back to you. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm excited to hear more. These are awesome photos, by the way. I feel like I am looking down your past as we speak. We're going to move forward to our next panelist, and we'll come back. This is also a good moment. If you are in the audience and you have a question for our panelists, you do not have to wait until the Q&A portion. Go ahead, open up the bottom of your Zoom application, type in the chat, or pick the Q&A function and feature, and go ahead and put your question in the Q&A spotlight. The Q&A section, and we'll be really excited to read them for our panelists. Our panelists are open to hearing from you. And this next one, again, is really exciting because Lisa Zugel brings a perspective that we haven't talked about yet, which is the perspective of a parent supporting both of her children, one with IDD and the other one who stepped in as a sibling advocate in a sibling advocate role. Lisa, we're so glad to have you with us. Lisa?
Thank you. And it's really an honor to be able to share the panel with Merrick and Bruce and Christine and hear their stories, from the sibling perspective, and also from, I think, a slightly different time. Devin and Jeffrey were born, around 2000. And so the experience that I'm having with them now perhaps is a little bit easier than it was in the time, when Dee Dee and Hillary were younger. So I'm very happy to be able to share the story that we have. It's just one story, and it's really, as Hadiya said, it's really a story more of my children, but through my eyes. And whenever I think about them and what they really mean to me, I look at this photo. I actually have it as my screensaver, and it was taken 10 years ago, and it really fills me, with that love, with that joy, and I think most importantly, that sense of agency. As a parent, something I've had to stretch and grow to learn is how to create the space for my children, to let go of them so that they can grow and learn and have that sense of agency of who they can be. So for those who are on this call and you have siblings who are healthy and able to be involved, I think that's wonderful. And I also think that, it might be a cousin or it might be a close family member who might play a similar role that our daughter has played in our son's life and developed a type of relationship, I think, that is really going to make, a big difference and is making a big difference in his life. So we'll go back to the start of the story. And as I said, Devin was born actually just at the turn, I guess at the turn of the century, right? 1994. And her brother was born in around Halloween of 1999. And for both of my kids, I do believe that the moment that they were born with that sense of self, with that sense of agency. And it was something that, I could and should nurture and make real. And that will be a theme that runs through this story here. And I want to share that and illustrate it with the two pictures. So on the left, if you look really carefully, you might see a brown bandage across Devin's chin. And that's because the night before Jeffrey was born, literally the night before he was born, she had her school walkathon. And it was about 90 degrees out. And then later that night, she went and she raced a little boy up a gym structure and fell down and proceeded to have to go to urgent care and get 10 stitches. So that was my Mighty Mite girl. And the next morning, her little brother was born. And then fast forward just a few weeks, and it was Halloween, and Devin decided to be Lily. And for those of you who are familiar with Lily, I'm going to actually hold up one of the Lily books here. Let's see if it shows up. This is one of our favorite books, and we read it when she was little, Julius, the Baby of the World. And Devin decided to be the little vibrant, confident mouse Lily. And of course, her Julius was Jeffrey, who became the Baby of the World. So those were their costumes. And if you get a hold of that book, you'll see why that sense of agency and who you are just comes through so loudly. So pick up the book. It's smile worthy no matter what age you are. So a little bit about where Jeffrey started. He was diagnosed with low-tone cerebral palsy when he was about 4 months old. So we didn't know when he was in utero, but pretty soon after, we were very fortunate that his pediatrician spotted the differences and that intervention would be appropriate. So we were super lucky. He got into an infant program at what was then called CAR and is now part of Ability Path. And the picture on the left is from one of our sessions at CAR. And as you can see, Devin, I think, had just as much fun as Jeffrey did. There he is with one of Jeffrey's teachers, Monique. And if you look at the picture on the right, you might see some resemblance. This is a picture taken fairly recently in Jeffrey's front yard in Mountain View. That was Devin visiting and Monique, who is now Jeffrey's home OT, and them greeting each other after all of these years, I guess more than 20 years. So this really highlights a second theme of our story, which is, I think we have found that, when you find treasured advisors, teachers, in your child's life, and no matter how old they are, we really found that if we can keep them in his life in some way or another, it can make all the difference. So agency and the relationships are really key. Next thing that kind of happened with Devin is when she went to high school, and of course they're about 5 years apart, so Jeffrey wasn't there with her. Devin was part of a program at Mountain View High where it was called Freestyle, and they were supposed to write a book, was sort of their big project, for the year. So she chose to write a book about Jeffrey, and she interviewed all of Jeffrey's team members. She wrote about what an IEP is, and she got to really have great conversations. The quote that's in the bottom right, I love, love, love this quote. It was by Robert. He's featured in the book, and he was Jeffrey's first behaviorist. And Robert said that Jeffrey has a kind of sense of humor, a sense of interacting with the world that I think makes a lot of sense to him. He has a lot of integrity that way. And I love that quote because it really, again, marries those ideas of having a sense of who you are, what you think is funny, and sharing that with other people, and having people like Robert around who really get Jeffrey. So Devin helping to bring that to life really made a huge difference, and we still treasure that book today. In the teen years, and I'm talking about Jeffrey's teen years, there were two big milestone things that happened. And one of them is that our family made a big decision. Instead of conserving Jeffrey, we decided that we wanted to opt with something that would give Jeffrey, or allow him to keep his freedoms and allow us just to support him in his decision making. And so we created a plain language power of attorney. We actually worked with an attorney, we worked with a speech therapist, and as you can see, Devin, my husband Jim, and I, we are Jeffrey's agents. We support him in his decision making. And the power of attorney works. It's really great. Literally, the doctor's offices, they all have it. It's just like being conserved in many ways. So it truly works. And I think even more importantly than the fact that it works from a mechanical perspective is the fact that going through this process, and it took a while, it took about 1.5 years to go through it, but thinking about it and deciding to do it, it really has created this foundation or this lens that we think about all of the decisions that Jeffrey is making. Even decisions like him keeping his ruddy little beard on his chin when mom wanted to shave it off. So that POA viewpoint on life, I think, is very important. So also during Jeffrey's teen years, we started collaborating with a group of families. And Dana, I see you're on the line here. This is when Dana Hooper came into our lives, the executive director of LSA. And ever since we met him, he has been not only a trusted advisor, but a friend, and helping us really jumpstart this whole process of envisioning what the future could look like. Back then, Dana actually called us the Mountain View Moms. We were a group of families who were learning together, envisioning together. And here we are at the YMCA in Mountain View. There is a familiar face in the right corner. That is Fran. Fran is a dear friend of LSA and as a prior board member. And on the left, you can see some of the families, and including a picture of Devin's profile there as she left college to join us for a weekend and talk about this planning for the future. So Hadiya asked me to share just a tiny bit about our vision and looking at what that looks like, this vision that we started with those families and has since grown into what we call Constellation Community Living. I'm sharing it because I think it's very pertinent to this sibling conversation and how siblings can see themselves as connected to a bigger whole. So our vision is, and we're really kind of at ground zero, maybe step one in that, is to have an intentional community of 5 to 12 adults, each living with autonomy in their homes with the necessary supports, within walking or driving distance, and in a natural environment of the local community. And what our goal is to create this community in which our son and others can love, I guess that's true, love and love life, just like you and me. So that's what we're trying to create together. And we already have the making of this vision is real. Like I said, that first step, we were already there. In 2020, yes, during the COVID years, Jeffrey moved into his own home in Mountain View, and he has 2 housemates, and he's thriving there, as you can see from this photo, with his caregiving team. So I think this photo says it all, and Jeffrey truly is the star of his constellation. So what do I mean about the fact that this is more of a social community, not a brick and mortar one? Well, what we're doing is thinking about how can we create a community where it is flexible and inclusive. And the way that we're thinking about that is that members of the community can live in a variety of homes with various types of ownership, and that they don't all have to live in the same house. They don't all have to live in a house. They can live in an apartment, and that the glue of what really keeps them together, it's that social connection, that social capital that keeps them together. And importantly, too, is that we've picked a location in Mountain View with exceptional resources, shopping centers, parks, the YMCA, high schools for volunteers, and near downtown Mountain View, including having a free shuttle. So all of these things are enabling us to create a real community within a community. And then how does Devon fit into that? How do we create this constellation that's truly a social community? So on this next slide, you'll see that the model is really built upon layers of support from local community partnerships, like the one we have with the YMCA, where we have inclusive swim events, and where siblings have one another. So it's not just one family or one house, but truly this network of families, siblings, friends who are supporting the community. And to make this practical, by having 5 to 12 individuals, we can have economies of scale. How do we know when the community is really working? Well, here's a picture taken on a warm evening back in April, where Jeffrey's team got together. And here, what I see is that the house, this home, this community brings out the best, not just in Jeffrey, but in everyone. And that's what's most important. So this team inspires me, but so does my daughter. So we're going to go to the next slide. Devon, I guess somewhat coincidentally, but perhaps influenced by the experience of living with Jeffrey and growing up with Jeffrey, she is building a community in Northern California in Cloverdale. And as part of that, she is also partnering with Clearwater Ranch, which is a development that's already in existence outside of Cloverdale, or actually inside of Cloverdale, and they're going to be having a inclusive picnic on June 7th. So if you'd like to join us, I can get you the details. So showing that my daughter is engaged in this in still and in her own way, not necessarily directly connected to us, but that this has informed the decisions and the work that she does. So proudest moment as a parent, well, Devon got married to Sebastian about 2 years ago. And as you can see here, the pictures say it all. Jeffrey was an integral part of Devon's wedding day. And then finally, where do we go from here? Yesterday, it was my dad's 97th birthday. And my sisters and I came from across California and met them, my parents in Monterey. And what I can see from my own experience with my siblings is it doesn't really matter where we are. We keep the connections, we keep the love, and the siblinghood that we have, or that Devon and Jeffrey have. I think this is what's going to make all the difference to make our vision of the future really work. Thank you.
That is awesome. Thank you so much, Lisa, for sharing that. And all the pictures, I feel like I feel like I've been there and I've experienced the things now, though I clearly was not. It's honestly remarkable, this constellation that you talk about, and how it's really all it's been working together, and in support of the community that you're building. That being said, we do have opportunity for questions from the audience, and while people are getting that together, I have one of our uh, staff members and one of my teammates. We've put in the link an interest form for Lisa Zugel, because as she's mentioned, she's building something. And although we all are building community all the time, especially on this panel, Lisa in particular is inviting you from the community. If you're looking for a space that might be good for your loved one, or you yourself are looking for a space, and you fit within the IDD community description or neurodiverse description. And as she mentioned, have that agency, or if you're receiving support and help from your loved ones and you want to check out their plan and what Lisa's been putting together, in the chat, you'll find that there's an interest form. We've been intentional not to show a QR code for any of that, because eventually we are going to have a specific talk just for Lisa. And we're hoping she's going to come and join us for our summer series, which is our normal IDD topics and trends. We'll just focus in on how this has been coming together. Thank you so much, Lisa, for the opportunity to just come on and share. We're going to open up the floor now for comments and questions from the audience. Again, feel free to use the chat Q&A if you'd like to remain anonymous, which you're more than welcome to do that. And then also to give an opportunity now for us to ask some of those previous questions with our other panelists. And so I'm going to go ahead and lead that off today. And I'll have both Bruce and Christine and Lisa come and share with us now. My goal, especially in this next section, is to get some of the piercing questions that you're asking or that you want to know now out of the way. But then also, there are going to be people who are going to come along after this, who are going to listen to, and they're going to hear this recording. And I want them to hear, again, from these personal experiences that maybe they can glean from or learn from, and maybe not. Maybe there won't be too much that they can compare to their story. But bottom line is, whoever you are, wherever you are, whenever you are, you're not alone in your experience. And we're going to talk about some of the things that may be relative to your experience today. Bruce, you talked earlier just about the experience between your brother and your father all kind of sitting down and talking about what needs to happen next. And I know Lisa explained kind of in detail the process for her son, and also in the unique scenario where Lisa's son isn't conserved. Can you help us understand, if we were a fly on the wall, kind of some very basics that your father shared with you about Hillary and the things that you essentially needed to know in order to carry on those next steps as her sibling? Can you give us maybe 1 or 2 points that he shared with you that you needed to know? What was the first things that came out of his mouth?
Well, the first thing was she was conserved by my father. And actually, what's interesting is that the court had not reviewed her conservatorship in 9 years, which is very unusual. And so when he brought it to me, and I started reading it, I'm a social worker, and so I have some idea about these things. Some of those privileges don't exist anymore. The state has basically repealed them. So we started talking about that, and just about Hillary having been so independent. She had been living in that house with there for like 25. So she has a very solid routine. It doesn't change all that much. She lives a fairly stressless life. And so the question then became, why does she need the conservatorship? And that's why I was nodding so much when Lisa was saying that she opted to do a POA instead, because that's exactly what we're going to do. Hillary can make a lot of decisions on her own, but finances, she's not very good with finances, but she knows how to use an ATM card, that kind of thing. And we can
And for those of
limit.
us who don't know,
Go ahead.
POA is power of attorney.
Yeah.
And so
There's-
why are you suggesting that? I know you're saying she has autonomy, but
because a conservatorship is very confining. It all decisions comes from the conservator. But with a POA, you're acting as an agent. That person maintains their independence, but certain things have oversight. So healthcare, there's a healthcare POA, and then there's a durable POA, which is more financial and assets and whatnot. And so we also learned this very intensely because both our parents were in their 90s, and our mother has dementia, and our father was slowly getting older too. And so we had to get power of attorney for both of them. And we tried to invoke it early on because, we had family trust, and it was very, very old. It was, even though it was done in the state, laws have changed. So you got to get these things looked at and updated on a regular basis. And, everything else just started flowing after that. So, it's, there are a lot of things that we didn't know about that we had to pay attention to. One of the things was also, since Hillary has been working, she's like one of Safeway's oldest, most senior employee. She became ineligible for SSI because she's working. She makes too much money, supplemental security income. And so now what ended up happening was sometimes some months she would go over the limit. And it was like, well, what do you do about that? Because then they cut off the SSI from her.
yeah.
Because she's gone over the limit. So learning about the Cal Able account, there's this Able program across the country. And learning about stuff like
you're dipping into our next talk, actually, Bruce. That's
okay.
This is a good moment for me to say, for me to plug. And if you're interested in learning more about financial support and stability for your IDD loved one or for yourself, please join us again on Wednesday, where we're going to be going over financial foundations and sustaining house and care for a lifetime. That's Wednesday, May 21st, 3 through 4 o'clock. Bruce, you said something, and I want to make sure that we give, and I don't mean to cut you off, please forgive me. I want to make sure that we have enough space, because two things that I heard you and Lisa say that were really important. And I think there is a strong movement for right now is autonomy and agency, and being able to give them space. Every individual deserves space to grow and see what they can do. And you're speaking as an advocate and as a support. I'd like to bring now on Christine, because I don't know if she's comfortable with sharing that, but as I understand, Christine, your Didi doesn't have, you don't have power of attorney. He's conserved.
He's conserved. Yeah.
He's conserved.
And that was
scenario that they just mentioned, that Lisa and Bruce just talked about. Would that work for Didi?
I mean, it does, because I think he's not, I would say his receptive language is probably better than his expressive language. And
What
he
would
was,
that mean?
He's not as communicative about and able to communicate about his own needs. And it he's also, I think the way he was raised was that he was not raised to be independent, right? I mean, he was raised to be he was raised in our family, and our family always thought, okay, well, he's going to be in our family. You know, they never thought he was going to be in a group home. I don't think they ever imagined a group home. And you know, my brother was born in 73, so different, you know, different time period than what you know, than Lisa. I mean, there are a lot more resources available now, and also I feel like there's just so much more support now, and maybe less stigma. But so I do think that it wasn't until he came to California that he was conserved, and I actually refer to myself as a parent sibling or a second mom, because I'm not his mom, but I kind of act like his mom sometimes. And that's just part of being an older sister probably, and a bigger sibling. But I do think the conservatorship is helpful. It does make it um it does make it legal, right? It does make it official. And I haven't I'm yeah, I haven't explored too much more in terms of what's next, because I'm still learning that. He just I think he's been with LSA, I don't know, since before the pandemic. I don't know the exact year. Um, and he's been in a group home and he's thriving. And and I think that, you know, when he was placed, I think our family, especially me, experienced this complete opening of, wow, there's so much support available when you go and seek it out. There's so much support available when you're open to it, right? And so in many respects, I feel a little bit sad that my parents didn't experience that. My dad has passed away, but my mom is still alive, and she's 86. And so it was just a different time, different experience. Yeah. And also a
And
different part of the country too. Yeah.
sure, sure. Well, thank you for sharing that, Christine. I want to punt it right back over to Lisa one more time, because you said something, Christine, and it made me think that there's this huge spectrum of what support looks like in each individual's life. I mean, that's true for all of us as we age, right? Genetics, race, ethnicity plays a role in health, and sometimes active activity and lifestyle plays a role in the type of long-term care, whether or not we're going to be able to age in place and things like that. Lisa, you brought something up where you talked about these Mountain View moms, as it got coined. And I want to know how many of you went into the same type of long-term care solution for your loved ones, for your sons or daughters. Are there, you know, any of you that share the same space? Did all of you pick the same style of care?
No, everybody went in different directions. Actually, I guess there were some few that ended up in the same place. And, you know, we were learning together. One of the ways we got to where we were at is that we went and saw maybe 10 different homes from different, you know, programs, literally up and down the bay. And one of the ones that really impressed, and I would say me the most, was the Cypress House, and seeing that, and was just, you know, being opened up, and just the organization, the thoughtfulness around it, and the fact it kind of felt like it would feel like a family in that house, made a big impact on me. So we did actually have the first client who was in that house was part of the Mountain View parents. Now there is a second one, which is very, very exciting. Also in that house, there are a couple, maybe 2 or 3, who are in the Common Roots Farm partner housing over in Santa Cruz. That kind of came out of this work that we did together. And then a couple other are in other residential care homes. So we are the only ones who are still in Mountain View, and this is why we are looking for new partners. It's been a very, very heavy lift to get Jeffrey's house up and running, but now we know how to do it, and we know that it can be replicated, and this community can be successful. So looking for partners in this.
Yeah, and one thing I want to circle back around to you. Thank you so much, Lisa, for saying that. I want to circle back around to you one more time, Bruce, because each of you now have said something that is really common amongst everything that was said, all of your experiences. And I want to make sure that I highlight this before we close out on this particular conversation tonight. I heard you say that you are all from the East Coast. Is that right? Everybody's from the East Coast, and you
Yes.
came here and you found Hatikva. Is that right?
Yes.
And explain to me, just help me understand, what was that like when it came to the sense of community that I'm hearing Lisa talk about, I'm hearing Christine talk about with support. I'm hearing you say that there was specific community that you found at Hatikva where Hillary was able to thrive. Did that mean anything for you? Is that a normal
Oh, yeah.
thing?
I wouldn't say it was necessarily normal. I mean, when we all grew up in New York. Hillary is going to be 55 years old this year. She was born in 1970. But she lived with my parents the whole time we were in New York. And then when my father decided to retire, they moved to San Diego, and they were looking for a place for her while she was in San Diego, and were just unable to find one that they liked. So she stayed with them. They were there probably about 2 or 3 years, and then this new house that was being formed. It was revolved around Jewish faith, and Hatikva is a Hebrew word, and I can't tell you what it means. I don't remember. But it was, and the people that were organizing it, all their family members that had disabilities, they were all pretty much kind of on the same functional level. So it was a really good match. But it wasn't the first one. The first one was a house, I think it was in Santa Cruz, and it revolved around a lot of cottage industry kind of work. I mean, they had beekeeping, they did a lot of gardening and agriculture, things like that. Hillary just she wasn't into it. And so she wanted something, I think, a little kind of easier, slower, not so much work to do. And then we went to visit Hatikva. It was, a really perfect fit. And so Hatikva was its own nonprofit, and it ran itself really well for many years, well over a decade. And then the house manager decided to retire. And it was this is like during COVID, hard to find, folks to step in, especially do it remotely, no less. And LSA, was introduced to us and the board, and the rest is history.
Yeah.
And we're very.
Oh, so go ahead, please. No, please. I didn't mean to cut you off.
I was just going to say, we know that, the level of functionality for the population that's in Hatikva is not quite the same as all the others in LSA, but we were very thankful they took a chance on us, and it really has helped the house to thrive and to help everyone there, find their right place, and yeah, I'll stop there.
Well, Bruce, I do want to say Hatikva actually means the hope in Hebrew, and rightfully so that we would end on that note, because You said a few things that I think I want to echo, that it wasn't necessarily the first place that you found in Santa Cruz. And I think Lisa said, you know, everyone in the Mountain View Moms kind of found different things that work for them. And Lisa's still, as we speak, building that community that works for her son. And Christine talked about, you know, wishing that her father was alive to see the type of resources and support, and that her mom was able to experience some of the type of resources and support that's out there now in comparison to then. And rightfully so, this particular series is called the Community Panel, because even if LSA, as many of us have discovered, is right for some, it's not right for all. But I'd like to encourage you, if you're hearing my voice and you're listening to this beautiful array of panelists speak, just about their experiences, that they found their community, that they didn't give up hope, right? That they continued to find what worked for their son, daughter, brother, sister, loved one until it was right. And when it was right, it worked out. So if you're interested and you'd like to take a deeper look, try to again define your community, maybe you think LSA might be right community for you, your family member, and yourself, and all to be a part of our community, I'd like to invite you to join us on our next panels, learn more about what we have to offer. There's also a family interest list form on our website. That's in the chat right now. Please, if you're interested, you're looking for support, housing, or you just want to learn more about who we are, join our family interest list. We'd be happy to learn more about you and to invite you into our community. And then finally, I wanted to say, we're going to have a really awesome race that's coming up, and that's coming up on September 6th. We'd love for you to join us. There's a huge QR code on your screen right now that you can join. There's also a link in the chat. That's a 5-10K where you can run, walk, you can cheer. And then we'll have a lot of food, a lot of fun, and some more resources available on that day in Los Gatos. You can join us in person. This series is one of my favorite things to do for all of LSA, because we're not asking anything from you except for you to come, listen, participate, and maybe even ask some questions. We will continue this series later on this week with financial planning. Before I conclude for the evening, I promised I was going to give the floor over to our partners. But before I do, Merrick, Christine, and Lisa, thank you so much for joining us on this first series. We did not get a chance to dive into the bigger depths of some of the questions that I'm sure you could share with us for hours on. But I appreciate you coming and just sharing a tiny microcosm of your experience over the last 2 years with your loved one and your sibling. I know Merrick had to leave. Thank you so much, Bruce, for jumping in there and standing on our behalf for your family. And also, I want to thank all of you for coming in and attending. If you have more questions, or you just want to continue the conversation with us, you can join us online. All of our socials are available on every major platform. We'd love to hear from you, and we'd love to hear about whatever it is that struck a chord with you on this particular talk. That being said, Riva from SV at Home is going to join us for a few minutes before we conclude today, and she's just going to share some resources for us. Thank you so much for joining us, Riva.
Thank you so much for having me. And first of all, I want to thank all the panelists for sharing your personal stories with us today. It definitely makes us feel hopeful. So I want to talk a little bit about SV at Home. We are thrilled to partner with LSA for Affordable Housing Month. This is a time to come together, learn, and take action. This year's theme is Strength in Housing, which is a powerful reminder that when we unite across sectors and communities, we can strengthen our collective commitment to housing justice and drive lasting change. At SV at Home, we lead this change through policy advocacy, leadership development, coalition building, and by amplifying the voices of those most impacted by the housing crisis here in Santa Clara County. We are aligned with LSA in our shared commitment to ensuring that everyone in our community has access to safe, stable, and affordable housing. The webinar series hosted by LSA provides a critical space to consider one of the most important shifts in housing development today, that is inclusive design. Designing affordable housing for all abilities is not an exception, it has to be a necessary. In Santa Clara County, affordable housing developments like the Kelsey, Mitchell Park Place, and 1585 Studios reflect the shift. These affordable housing developments accommodate the needs of individuals with intellectual and development disabilities while benefiting entire communities through universal design, enhanced accessibility, and shared community spaces that foster connection, independence, and belonging. These affordable housing developments were conceptualized by embracing a design philosophy prioritizing people of all abilities, informed by real-world experience and shaped through community collaboration. This approach to designing affordable housing transforms how we build housing from concept to construction. Inclusion is not an afterthought, it's a core value. One of the critical challenges for affordable housing development is the availability of state funding. Which is like this main funding source for affordable housing, which is highly competitive and oversubscribed. However, the good news is that affordable housing developments that dedicate units for individuals with special needs receive additional points, and this will make it like easy for them to secure funding. This creates a critical opportunity for us to leverage incentives to advance inclusive, affordable housing when we collectively advocate for it. We are excited to partner in this growing movement and learning from each other, lifting up lived experience and taking meaningful steps forward. I'm just going to share some links where you can look at some of the concepts I shared with you. Thank you again.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Riva. And we've enjoyed this sponsorship, or this partnership, I should say, with SV at Home for the last 2 years because of Affordable Housing Month. And so as a part of this continued series, please join us again later on this week, where we will have another group of panelists, as well as another representative from SV at Home who will join us, continue to give us more helpful links, as you can see in the chat, and then also tell more about your situation. Join us next week, ask more questions, especially we're going to have a few financial planning experts who are going to be on the panel, and a couple of more people who are going to share from our community that will talk about their experience. Thank you again for all of our panelists who join us, Merrick and Bruce, Christine and Lisa. Thank you so much, audience, for joining us, and we'll see you again later on this week. Thank you, and bye-bye. Take care.